Now, elections this past week have energized progressive Democrats, casting a chill over the efforts to end the record-breaking government shutdown. Let's turn now to our political panel. I'm joined by Fox News contributor and Democratic strategist Leslie Marshall and former California GOP Chairwoman Jessica Millan Patterson. Thank you both for being here. Leslie, let me get to you first because I'm sure you would like to do a happy dance in the wake of these elections. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I already did. If I do it, people are going to say I'm going to be imitating the president, right? No, I honestly, it was better results than I expected because Republicans are saying these were in blue states. Really, Ohio is blue, Mississippi is blue, Florida is blue, Georgia is blue. No, and when you look at Virginia, even though people look at Virginia as a blue state, really isn't. It's blue in the north, but it's quite red in the south. And when you just look at the numbers, dozens of state seats flipped in the state of Virginia. We had a seat in the United States that hasn't been Democrat since the 1800s. If I were Republicans, and it's obvious, if I were Republicans, I would do what my party has had to do since the general election, which is to have that come to Jesus moment and say, what have we done wrong here? But instead, they're going on TV every day saying this is no big deal. Well, and it is, because they're on TV every day.
Let's see if this Republican is going on TV every day and doing that. Jessica, your response?
Well, certainly this did happen largely in blue states. And was there a path to victory? Yes, there was. And if you look at the numbers from the people that turned out to vote for President Trump in 2024, in both New Jersey and Virginia, about 600,000 of those Trump voters stayed home. In California, about 3 million. In every single case, if those people would have turned out to vote, Republicans would have had a better night. The person who figures out how to turn out those Trump voters when he's not on the ballot is going to be someone who's very successful.
I thought it was interesting this week, Leslie and Jessica, when Senator Bernie Sanders sort of hijacked a Chuck Schumer press conference, not exactly hijacked it, but he wandered in and started speaking at the invitation of reporters. And he was talking about a very real division that he sees in the Democratic Party. Let's listen to the Senate here and I'll get your response.
Of course, there's a division within the Democratic Party. There's no secret to anybody here. What did you see in New York City? What are you going to see all over this country? You're going to see progressives running, protecting the needs of the working class, taking on big money interests, fighting for an agenda that works for all, not just the few.
So a progressive, obviously, in New York City, what you might call moderate Democrats or more moderate Democrats in Virginia and Jersey. So there is certainly a division, but is that a difficult division or is it just a breadth of views that is a good thing for the party?
I think it's a good thing for the party because what it does is, as long as you're united over we're Democrats, when you have your way of thinking here and your way of thinking there, I mean, obviously what's going to work in, look, you have a Democratic, governor of Kentucky, right? And, he is definitely more of a centrist, and you have centrist moderates. I'm a moderate centrist Democrat, and they need to work together. Republicans have this too. They, they have their Freedom Caucus, which used to be the Tea Party. Now it's Tea Party Light, if you will, the Freedom Caucus. And those divisions are only problematic if you don't have the unity. So my party needs to say, and AOC has said this, that we can have all of these opinions because we need to come together. Where the division can be a problem is in a general, but in these statewide races, that is not as much of a problem as we saw.
Is it to the Republicans' benefit if the Democratic Party is pulled further and further left by the likes of Mamdani, AOC, et cetera?
I think it's certainly easier to show a contrast between policies that work and policies that don't. And when you have someone like Mamdani be elected, when you have someone like Bernie Sanders who does hijack a press conference from the Democrat leader in the Senate, you're seeing the radical wing of the party taking their victory lap and kind of giving a tisk-tisk to the leadership for not supporting their radical views.
All right, before we go, we heard, as we do very rarely these days, from former President Joe Biden last night, who was predictably dismissive of President Trump. Here's the former president.
Anyone see what he's done to the east wing of the People's House, the White House? It's a perfect symbol of his presidency. Trump has taken a wrecking ball not only to the People's House, but to the Constitution, to the rule of law, to our very democracy.
20 seconds each. Quick reaction to seeing President Biden and what he said. Leslie, first.
I'm not surprised. I mean, Donald Trump trashes Joe Biden and blames him for every mishap of this administration pretty much on an hourly basis. What's the problem with a retired Democratic president standing up and speaking to what many in my party feel, that there is a wrecking ball, not just to the East Wing of the White House, but yes, to the threat to democracy and to the Constitution of this country.
Anything former president has to say relevant, Jessica?
I don't think so. I don't think anyone's longing for the days of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. In fact, they're all looking forward, even in the Democrat Party.
Jessica, Leslie, always great to see you. Thank you so much for spending part of your Saturday with us.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.